Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn, aka Mental MacGyver. I provide luxury level high performance support and coaching to executives, founders, celebrities, and athletes. With me today, I have Laura Agafitei. She is a strategy and design consultant for the health and wellness industry based in Dublin. I have Catarina von Maydell. She helps business leaders build disruptive business models and define key leverage points to create powerful change and impact using a process of systemic, organizational, and human evolution. And I have Claire Schwartz. She is a grief coach and trauma healing expert, demystifying and destigmatizing grief and trauma healing, working with individuals, organizations, and families. The question I have today: how do you function in a dysfunctional workplace? Catarina, kick us off.
Such a great question, Dr. Robyn. I really appreciate that one. We are living in a world where dysfunction is increasing everywhere. If you look at the stats that Gallup is putting out and Deloitte and a whole bunch of other organizations, we can see that basically mental health is on the decline, anxiety is on the increase, depression is on the increase. So those are just the relational pieces, but then we also have a very unstable world, and I'm laughing because I don't want to cry, between what's happening with the environment and geopolitical conflict and so many other things. So we're totally surrounded by dysfunction. And then if you look at the research that talks about how disconnected we are from each other, we're not even in a position where we can actually regulate ourselves in a healthy way. Because normally what we do is we regulate by being able to connect with other people, which means eye contact, physical presence if possible, and really sort of helping each other to find places of safety, psychological safety and physical safety. So we have this rise of chaos and a decline of our ability to deal with it, and then increasing pressures on people. I think all of us have probably worked in places that were dysfunctional, but I think those types of places are only on the increase, where you hear about all these stories in the workplace and everywhere else where people are just not able to get along. And the real risk of that is that we're not able to innovate, we're not able to change, we're not able to evolve. So that's to me why this is such an important question. I think we have to think about, how do we address that in the short term and the long term? How do we address that individually and collectively, separately? And then also, how do we differentiate between palliative responses, which is just how do we deal with it in the moment, and also more systemic changes, how do we actually change our patterning and also how our societies work? And I say societies because we're talking about the workplace, but it basically is everywhere.
I agree with everything that Catarina said, and I was just trying to think how this applied to my previous situation that I was in. I dealt with a very toxic environment before starting on my own, and it's very hard when you are in a toxic environment to understand what's happening to you. So I want to just point that out for everybody who has been through this or is going through this, that it's very hard to be aware that that situation is not useful for you and the impact that it has on you. I would suggest, as a solution to this, maybe the first step would be self-awareness of what's happening and documenting everything that you are going through into the workplace. Because if you have it written down, it's easier to process it, maybe, because we have a history of gaslighting ourselves very much, and it's really hard to understand what's the reality of the facts. Another thing that I would say is, depending on how bad the situation is, try to ask for help. But again, it depends. If you're not used of asking for help, and if you feel that this is a sign of weakness, it's very hard to step out of it and do it. So I think every situation has its own context. What helped me is realizing that I reached a point where I was in pain every single day, and I wasn't doing anything. I was just taking the tram back to home and after work, and I was in pain. And I realized that this certain amount of pain is not normal anymore. So that's when I decided to go and ask for help. And when it gets very bad, obviously, it's hard to control your emotions. I wouldn't say at the work I had any bad experience like me lashing out, but unfortunately it has a big impact of my lifestyle, of my self-esteem. Everything was really, really bad, even my social interactions, my health. So it took me a long time to recover. Thankfully, after 2 years of therapy now, I feel like I'm finally getting on track with my life. But I would like to underline that sometimes this impact is not seen.
Claire.
Yeah, I'm glad you found your way out, Miss Laura, and that you're feeling better and that you have some brightness back in your life. It's the workplace is tricky. I mean, any deeply dysfunctional, whether that's in your personal life, your family life, it is going to take its toll. The trick with the workplace is it's connected to your livelihood. And a lot of folks are trapped in their work situation because they don't have options about, oh, just get another job. Oh, a lot of people don't know to document, or the tiers of power don't give them a voice, don't give them the mechanism to find their way out in a healthy way. Suddenly they will find themselves labeled as difficult or a troublemaker and get pushed out. So it can be a very, very disempowering feeling and reality, which of course it takes a toll on your family and on your health. One can be very fortunate to find your way out, but I'm thinking we've perhaps been fortunate and privileged to be able to find our way into different work environments, different strata of power dynamics, and have been able to reinvent, but a lot of folks don't have that available. There need to be changes, systemic changes, so that people can ask for help outside of the work environment as well, so that they feel like they're because the gaslighting doesn't only come from ourselves. Not only I don't recognize it, but I'm afraid to say something because I might lose my job. And that's a terrible trap that people can find themselves in. Ideally, folks can get another job where folks are more functional. Yeah.
I want to go back to something that Laura said, where she said, you have to notice. And like someone commented on the quick hits about performance improvement plans and if they're useful or not. And said she'd been put on performance improvement plan and she's miserable. And I commented back to her and I said, no job is worth the way you feel right now.
Yes.
And I think that's the hardest thing when you end up in these dysfunctional situations and you feel like you don't have any options. Your health and your well-being are your number one priority. No job is worth giving those up.
I think all three of us have some independence in how we work. And there's a lot more people who are doing that. I think a lot of this great resignation stuff, which is now they've renamed it to something else. And the fact that people are just sort of putting in time, I'm forgetting all the names of this, sorry, where people quiet quitting and all these types of things.
Yeah.
I think all of those things are symptoms of people saying, I'm making enough money, I can save some money, I can build some safety net, and then I can leave. Or once they lay me off and give me a package. I think that's what the bargain that a lot of people are making, and it's hurting our economy. Quiet quitting, Gallup just published and said it costs $8.8 trillion per year. It's 1/3 of our global GDP is what quiet quitting is costing us. Yeah. And then if you look at the discussions in the professional environments, where law firms, accounting firms, I think it's in other professions as well, where they can't keep senior professional women. And I think it's because as women, and I would imagine this is probably in minority groups as well, and other visible and invisible minorities, where people just don't stay around.
It becomes not worth the fight.
And again, it is a mark of, if you're talking about law firms, you're talking about people in a certain socioeconomic status. If you're talking about folks who are barely above the poverty line, they can't quiet quit. They can't build a 6-month cushion. The money comes in, it goes out before it hits your wallet. So that's a whole other problem of that tier of society. It's not a surprise that poverty and poor health are connected.
Yeah. That is our 10 minutes. I don't know if we actually answered the question. I do think that what we have told people is that this is messy and it's hard, and noticing that you're in a dysfunctional place is the first step to figuring out what you do, and that we recognize that just walking away from it isn't always the best option or even an option at all. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And I look forward to speaking to all three of you again very soon.